I remember the fog that night, curling low over the cracked asphalt of the old highway. The pale light of a broken street lamp flickered overhead, casting long, trembling shadows into the mist. Everything was silent, so silent that even the soughing of my own breath seemed loud, almost wrong. The trees leaned closer, dark and watching, their branches tapping lightly against each other like nervous fingers. I had taken this road countless times before, but something felt off. I thought I saw a shape ahead, pale and glimmering, almost like it was made of the fog itself. My headlights flickered, cutting the shape in and out of sight, leaving only questions in the cold air. A static sound buzzed through the car's radio, though there was no station nearby, no signal at all. My heart pressed against my ribs, heavy and insistent, and yet I couldn't look away. Then, just as the wind shifted, I saw them, tall, thin, with eyes that reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. They didn't move like humans, and they didn't speak, but somehow I felt their curiosity, their attention, pinned to me. I wanted to drive away, but my body refused to obey. That's when I saw it. Something rising behind them in the fog. Something I couldn't name, and I knew, in the quietest part of my mind, that the highway had not been empty for a very long time. The highway stretched empty before me. Fog curled along the edges of the road, thick and restless. Night pressed down, cold against my skin. The tires hummed softly over cracked asphalt. Every so often, a breeze carried the scent of wet earth and rust. I thought I was alone. Then I saw it, a street lamp, standing like a sentinel in the fog. Its light flickered violently, splitting the darkness into jagged fragments. Shadows leapt and twisted beneath it. I slowed, squinting through the mist. The shapes, they moved with a strange intelligence. Almost human, almost waiting. My chest tightened, and a low vibration thrummed through me. The hum grew, subtle at first, wrapping around my ribs, soft and insistent. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the engine, the tires, the wind, but it wasn't. The lamp's glow pulsed again, a stuttering heartbeat. Shadows bent backward, then forward, as if stretching to touch the fog itself. I blinked, and the shapes seemed closer, closer than they should have been. A chill ran down my spine, carrying the scent of ozone and damp metal. I gripped the steering wheel. The hum sank into the bones of my hands, into the floor of the car. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. Then darkness. The lamp died. The road vanished into nothing but fog and night. Even the hum stopped, leaving only a pressure, heavy and expectant. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick. Somewhere in the mist, the fog swirled, whispering over the asphalt. Something moved, or maybe nothing. I blinked, and the shapes were gone. The black pressed closer, thick enough to touch. Every hair on my arm stood on end. Every nerve felt alive, listening. I told myself to focus on the road, to breathe. The wheel felt cold, almost too cold to hold. My hands shook, slow, subtle, almost polite in their terror. The hum returned, louder now, filling the car with vibration. It matched my heartbeat, or maybe it was the other way around. Then, abruptly, it vanished. The silence hit, heavy as fog settling on the highway. I could hear my pulse. Soft, insistent, alone. I imagined footsteps, pale and slow, pressing to the mist toward me. But I couldn't see anything, couldn't move. A shadow flitted past the edge of the windshield. Or maybe it was a trick of the light, a trick of the fog. Either way, my stomach knotted, and I stayed frozen, my eyes wide in the dark. The smell of damp leaves reached into the cracks of the window. Cold air whispered across my neck. Every instinct screamed to move, to leave, but my feet were glued to the pedals. Some unseen weight held me there. Time thinned. Minutes stretched and melted into one another. The street lamp remained dead, a black wound in the fog. The shapes didn't return, but a memory of them lingered, soft, patient, like breath on my neck. Then I noticed the subtle shifts in the fog. It pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, almost waiting. My hands shook again, slower this time, quieter under the hum of silence. The road ahead was empty, endless, yet I felt eyes on me, lingering in the folds of mist. No movement, no sound, just a presence, watching. I took a slow, Careful breath. The hum, the light, the shadows, they were gone. But the feeling remained, pressed into my chest like a memory I couldn't forget. Heavy, cold, patient. I started driving again. Fog clung to the car, swirling like smoke around my tires. The highway stretched on, empty, silent. But I knew the flickering street lamp was waiting, somewhere ahead or perhaps behind. And I knew, if I glanced too long into the mist, I might see it again. Those shapes, human enough to be familiar, alien enough to be wrong. I didn't look back. I couldn't, and the silence followed, soft, patient, whispering across the empty road. I parked near a small clearing. The engine's warmth faded quickly into the chill of night. Fog clung to the ground, curling around the roots like pale fingers. I stepped out, boots sinking into damp leaves. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, sharp under my nose. Every movement felt exaggerated, echoing through the quiet. The trees around me, they weren't still. Branches scraped together, soft and deliberate, like whispers in an empty room. I thought I heard them sigh, bending under some unseen weight. Shadows slithered along the fog ground, long, thin shapes twisting around tree trunks, moving just beyond focus. For a moment, I thought I caught eyes above me, watching, patient, silent. A chill ran over my shoulders, sharp and sudden. The smell of metal came with it, faint, almost sweet. Something glinted between the trunks, a strange metallic flash, barely caught in the fog. I took a careful step forward. Leaves pressed underfoot, damp and muffled. The trees seemed to lean closer, branches trembling against each other. Their whispers grew, rhythmic now, like breathing through hollow trunks. I wanted to tell myself it was the wind, but the air felt still, heavy. Watching, the glint reappeared, closer, brighter, like the eye of some silent creature, reflecting the faint moonlight. I crouched, squinting through the mist. The metallic flash vanished, swallowed by fog and shadow. A rustling followed, subtle, circling behind the trees. I froze, listening, breath shallow, almost inaudible. The shadows seemed alive, stretching toward me, dissolving into the mist. Every sense tightened. I felt my skin prickle, my pulse beating in my ears. Even the air pressed against me, thick and wet. I could smell damp leaves and iron. I could feel the fog curling around my ankles, cold and soft. I could see the branches trembling, whispering secrets to each other. Something shifted above me. A branch snapped softly, deliberate, and for a fraction of a second, I was sure I wasn't alone. Eyes just above the tree line, watching, waiting. I wanted to move, to leave, but the ground held me, muffling every step. And the trees, they whispered closer. The metallic glint returned, flickering, a pale light reflecting off something smooth, flat, cold. But I couldn't see what it was. Not fully. A breeze stirred. The branches clattered together, whispers rising to a hiss. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and uneven, echoing under the fog. The clearing stretched around me, empty, yet I felt it, the presence lingering between the trunks, patient, calm, waiting for me to see, to reach, to notice. I stepped back. The metal flash disappeared. The shadows retreated into mist. The whispers softened. Only the fog remained, thick, curling around roots and trunks. The smell of wet earth heavy in the air. I took a deep breath. The trees loomed quietly, motionless now, yet alive. Their whispers faded, leaving only silence, still and expectant. I returned to the car. The night pressed against the glass, dense and watching. Fog rolled through the clearing, curling, shifting, alive. I didn't look back, but I felt it, eyes, metal whispers, and somewhere, deep in the trees, I knew they were waiting. The fog pressed against the windshield, thick and restless. Headlights cut pale shapes into the mist, shadows bending just beyond reach. The night felt heavier here, damp and sharp with the scent of wet asphalt. The car radio crackled suddenly, a burst of static that jumped to my chest. Then words, almost words, hovered in the noise. I couldn't make them out, just fragments, swallowed by hiss and hum. I turned the dial. Static followed. The hum persisted, rising slowly, insistent. It wrapped around the car, soft but pressing, vibrating through the seat and steering wheel. Outside, the fog thickened. Shapes moved just beyond the headlights. I blinked. They vanished. Or maybe they had never been there. A chill pressed against my skin. The smell of damp metal and earth clung to the air inside the car. I realized my hands were slick with sweat. Or maybe it was the cold. The radio hummed again, louder now, almost melodic. I tried to change stations. The hum followed. It didn't matter where I turned the dial. It was everywhere, inside and outside, vibrating through my ribs. Something pressed against the glass. A faint mark, pale and slick where a hand, or something like it, had touched. I blinked. It vanished. The fog reflected only the dim headlights, smooth and unbroken. I tried to breathe steadily, but the hum thrummed against my lungs, a pulse I could not escape. The air felt thick. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, patient, waiting. Outside, the fog shifted. Branches scraped against each other, whispering in rhythm with the hum. Shapes slithered just at the edge of vision. The headlights caught nothing solid, yet the sense of eyes, watching and patient, lingered. The radio broke again, static and half words like soft breaths behind my ear. I felt the vibration in my chest, low and insistent. It wasn't music. It wasn't words. It was something else. A cold smear on the glass reappeared. I reached, but it vanished under my fingers. The hum rose again, filling the car with pressure, thick and unrelenting. I froze, feeling the fog pressing closer, seeping through the edges of the doors. Shadows moved in the mist. I could see them stretching, slithering along the road. The air smelled of wet asphalt and iron, sharp and sudden. The radio hummed, rhythmic now, echoing my heartbeat, or perhaps it was the other way around. I tried to focus on the road. The tires hummed over asphalt, wet and broken, but the pressure persisted, the hum pressing against my skin and skull. I imagined soft fingertips trailing along the glass, vanishing whenever I tried to find them. Time thinned. Minutes stretched into long, silent waves. The fog held every sound and breath in place, heavy and patient. Every nerve felt alive, every sense sharpened edges. The radio whispered again. Not words, not language, just vibration, resonating through the chest, inescapable, intimate. Something pressed close, unseen. Soft, deliberate. I gripped the wheel tighter. Cold sweat ran down my neck. The fog moved like smoke, curling around the car, pulsing with the hum. Shadows flickered, stretching long, thin fingers along the wet road. Then silence. The hum vanished as suddenly as it arrived. The radio was dead. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. The glass was clear now. No smears, no fingerprints. Just pale reflections of my own face. Yet the sense of being watched remained, patient, quiet, lingering. I exhaled slowly, feeling the pressure lift, though the memory of it pressed in my chest. The road stretched ahead, empty. Fog rolled along the asphalt like restless water. The night held its secrets close. And I drove on, knowing the hum could return at any moment. The fog thickened along the road, curling around the headlights like slow-moving smoke. Every curve of asphalt felt longer tonight, stretched and uncertain. The air was cold, damp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and iron. I noticed movement first at the edges of the fog. Tall, thin shapes, shifting, never fully in focus. Every flicker of the headlights revealed more, elongated limbs stretching toward nothing, pale, featureless faces. I blinked. They were gone, then returned. The fog swallowed them, only to reveal them again, closer, always just beyond reach. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The cold leather pressed against my palms, slick with sweat. Every nerve felt alive, attuned to the subtle rustle of the fog, the faint scraping of branches against themselves. I glanced at the windshield. My reflection stared back, but delayed. Each movement I made, each blink or shift, was mimicked a fraction of a second later, like someone or something was learning me, copying me. The shapes moved again, silent and deliberate, elongated, wrong, stretching against the fog. I felt the vibration of unease in my chest, pulsing with every heartbeat. The road narrowed, bending into shadows. I smelled damp earth and wet asphalt, the air thick as if it were holding its breath. Branches scraped the side of the car, whispering against the metal, soft and patient. Each flicker of headlights revealed more of those figures. Limbs too long, faces pale and blank. They never advanced, never retreated. But the sense of being followed grew, like cold fingers brushing the back of my neck. I tried to focus on the tires, the wet asphalt, but every glance to the fog's edge returned them. Eyes, or the sense of eyes, watching, calculating, patient. My reflection in the glass move again, just a heartbeat behind. It shouldn't be possible. Yet there it was, echoing my movements, waiting for me to notice. I could almost feel it breathe. The fog shifted. The tall figures flickered, moving with slow, unnatural grace. Shadows pulled at their feet, stretching toward me in the dim light. Every exhale came cold, sharp in my throat, carrying the scent of damp leaves and rusted metal. I wanted to look away, but my eyes remained glued, tracing them through the fog. The road stretched endlessly, yet I felt trapped in a narrowing tunnel of shadows. The windshield trembled lightly under my fingers. Or maybe it was the air, or maybe them. I couldn't tell. The shapes swayed gently, deliberate, like tall reeds in a dark river. Their featureless faces seemed to pulse in the fog, blank and infinite. I could almost hear them whispering, faint static like breaths echoing just beyond comprehension. Time slowed. Every second stretched into long, hollow waves. The fog pressed close, cold and wet, filling the car with silence, yet alive with presence. Every nerve screamed, every sense heightened, yet I couldn't move. I blinked again. The windshield mirrored my delayed movements. The figures lingered, patient and still, not advancing, not fleeing, just there. The road finally curved, giving a glimpse of open space. The fog thinned slightly, revealing only empty trees, trembling softly in the night. The tall figures faded, blending into shadows at the edges of vision. My reflection in the glass returned to normal, yet the feeling of being mimicked remained, lingering at the back of my mind. I exhaled slowly, letting my hands fall lighter on the wheel. The cold leather pressed gently, grounding me. The fog still whispered against the car, soft, patient, like it was keeping a secret. And the road stretched onward, empty and uncertain, carrying me deeper into the night. The forest waited in silence. Fog rolled through the trees, curling around trunks like pale smoke. The air smelled damp and earthy, sharp under my nose. I stepped out, boots pressing into wet leaves. Every rustle felt exaggerated, amplified by the stillness. Something hummed faintly, low and irregular, deep in the woods. I paused, listening. The static rose, soft and persistent, brushing against the edges of thought. Shapes moved in the fog, too fast, too jagged to be human. They flickered just at the corner of vision, gone the instant I blinked. A cold pressure brushed my shoulder. Nothing visible, nothing tangible, yet undeniable. The skin prickled where it touched, like ice sliding across my arm. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Its beam cut swaths of the fog, pale and unsteady. I caught a figure, silent, still, standing a few feet away. I blinked. Gone. The static pulsed again, rising and falling like breathing. It came from somewhere deep in the trees, surrounding me, yet never near. Every nerve was alive, every sense sharp and screaming. I could feel the fog pressing against my face, damp on my skin. I could smell wet earth and something metallic, faint but unsettling. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift, or maybe it was my mind. Shapes darted again, fleeting and wrong. Limbs bending at impossible angles, twisting against the fog. They didn't move like animals. They didn't move like people. I stepped back, careful, boots crunching softly on wet leaves. The cold presence pressed closer, brushing my neck this time. No weight, no form, just awareness, patient and waiting. The flashlight flickered again. A glimpse, another figure, pale and still, a featureless face in the mist. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but it was there, watching. I tried to breathe slowly, but each exhale felt loud. The static followed, vibrating under my ribs, resonating in my chest. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt rooted, as though the forest had claimed them. Branches whispered above, scratching against each other. Shadows darted across the fog, elongating, dissolving, impossible to focus on. I smelled damp leaves and moss, the scent sharp in my nostrils, grounded me just enough. The pale figure returned in a flicker of light. Closer now, just at the edge of the beam. Gone the moment I blinked again. The static hummed louder, thrumming through the fog and my bones alike. I shivered, cold crawling under my skin. The presence brushed again, almost playful, almost patient. I could feel it breathing with the forest, moving with it, invisible and deliberate. The fog twisted around me, curling with purpose, alive in its motion. Shapes flickered in and out, always at the edge of perception. The static followed, low and insistent, filling the silence with something almost like language. I strained, trying to hear it, to understand it, but comprehension slipped away. My flashlight faltered again, beam wavering, and the figure appeared once more, closer, then gone. Every time I blinked, the fog swallowed it, leaving only emptiness and memory. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm my chest, my hands still trembling. The static faded into the background, lower, more distant. The figures stopped flickering, though the sense of them remained patient and quiet. The forest waited unbroken, fog curling between trees, shadows pooling like water. Something lingered in the cold, unseen but near, and I knew if I stayed too long it would return. I stepped back toward the car, leaves damp underfoot. The static softened into nothing. The fog shifted, curling alive. The pale figures had vanished, yet the memory of their gaze lingered on my skin. I reached the car. The warmth inside welcomed me, but I could feel the forest's presence pressing against the glass. Soft, patient, silent. And the night remained, thick with fog, waiting, whispering, unseen. The clearing stretched before me, fog curling along the edges of damp earth. Night pressed down, cold and quiet, carrying the scent of wet leaves and moss. Every breath I took felt thick, heavy with anticipation. Then I saw it, a pale light hovering just above the treetops. Soft, unnatural, almost breathing. It pulsed slowly, rhythmical, casting long, distorted shadows that twisted and stretched across the ground. The shadows moved like water, bending over roots and stones, curling into shapes I couldn't name. The fog wrapped around them, blurring edges, softening the world into something uncertain. A low hum rose from the earth itself, vibrating through my feet, through my chest, resonating in the air around me. I felt in my bones, a pull, subtle but insistent, drawing me closer despite every instinct screaming to run. The cold air brushed my skin, carrying the metallic tang of wet soil and something deeper, older. I took a step forward. The ground pressed soft underfoot, spongy and wet. The hum thickened, pressing against my ears and chest simultaneously. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, reaching toward the pale light, toward me. I blinked. The light pulsed again, brighter this time, almost alive. The fog shimmered in its glow, curling, twisting, alive. The hum vibrated through the soles of my boots, resonating beneath the earth. The trees leaned slightly, bending as though straining to see. Branches brushed softly against each other, whispering in rhythm with the hum. The air smelled metallic and sweet, like iron warmed by damp heat. Another step, closer. The shadows writhed, distorted by the pale glow. Some looked like figures, elongated and thin, watching me with invisible eyes. I wanted to turn back, but my feet refused. The light pulsed slower, deliberate, almost contemplative. The hum matched it, low and patient, vibrating in tandem with the ground beneath me. I could feel the rhythm in my chest, my lungs, the tips of my fingers. Something brushed my arm, soft, fleeting, almost tender. No weight, no shape, just awareness pressing against me. I shivered, breath catching in my throat. The shadows stretched again, crawling along the ground toward the light, or maybe toward me. The fog twisted around their movement, carrying their presence, soft, patient, alive. I stepped closer still. The earth hummed, the pale light pulsed, the shadows shifted, bending, stretching, always moving. The hum resonated through the fog, through the trees, through my entire body. A faint metallic smell mingled with the cold, damp air, biting softly at my senses. The clearing felt infinite. Every step seemed longer than the last. The light pulsed, shadows danced, and the hum held me in place, soft and insistent. Curiosity and dread swirled together, inescapable. I took another step. Closer. The shadows writhed beneath the glow. The air pressed against my face, cool, damp, alive. And then the light pulsed once more. The hum softened, almost patient now, like it had paused to watch me decide. The shadows still twisted, stretching long and impossible. The fog curled around me, alive in its silence, waiting. I exhaled slowly, feet still moving forward. Despite the pull of fear, despite the cold pressing at my skin, the pale light hovered, gentle and terrible, a presence that filled the clearing with possibility and threat. The shadows leaned, the fog breathed, and the hum lingered, low and infinite, beneath the earth. And I kept walking, closer, into the light, into the pulse, into the waiting silence. The fog hung heavy between the trees, curling around trunks like pale smoke. Every footstep pressed into damp earth, soft and muffled. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold metal, sharp under my nose. Then it caught my eye, a metallic glimmer, shifting among the fog, reflecting pale, broken light. I froze, heart pressing against my ribs. Watching, I inched forward, boots pressed soft against wet moss and fallen leaves. The reflection moved just enough to be alive, then vanished when I blinked. Gone. Yet the image lingered in my mind, stubborn and sharp. The trees leaned closer, shadows pooling at their bases. The fog wrapped around them, alive, breathing, moving with a glimmer. I could feel the chill in the air, thick against my skin, mixing with the smell of wet earth and rust. I saw puddles near the roots of the trees. Reflections shimmered across their surfaces. My own face stared back, familiar yet wrong, elongated, stretched, features just slightly off. I leaned closer, the fog curling around my hands and wrists. Cold pressed against my skin, damp, soft, insistent. Every movement felt magnified, deliberate. The glimmer flickered again, teasing the edge of vision. The reflection pulsed in the puddle, bending with a rhythm I couldn't name. I blinked, and it stretched differently, almost smiling, almost alive. The metallic surface among the trees shifted again, slipping between shadows. I felt the fog press closer, soft, patient, alive with presence. The metallic glimmer seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, or maybe the other way around. I stepped forward. The ground was soft beneath my boots, moss pressing cold and wet. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, alive and patient. The puddle reflected the world wrong, distorted, lingering. The glimmer flickered again, closer this time, moving with deliberate, impossible grace. I tried to see its shape, but it dissolved into the fog, leaving only memory and cold. The puddle beneath my feet rippled slightly. Reflection shifted, elongating my arms, my neck, even the curve of my back. I could feel the chill in my chest, tightening, pressing in rhythm with the soft hum of the fog. Branches brushed softly against each other above, whispering in rhythm with the movement of the glimmer. Shadows twisted, curling around tree trunks, pooling at the base of my feet. I exhaled slowly, the air damp, metallic, and alive. Another blink, and the reflection changed again. Elongated, pale, just wrong. The metallic glimmer flickered at the edge of sight, always present, always teasing, never fully revealed. I wanted to step back, to retreat into certainty, but the pull was subtle, insistent. Curiosity wound tight with unease, drawing me forward, closer to the fog, closer to the glimmer. The puddles reflected it now, tiny flashes of metallic light dancing across the water. Shadows stretched across the fog, dancing with them. The air hummed softly, vibrating through the soles of my boots, through the tips of my fingers. I took another step, closer. The metallic glimmer slipped once more between trees. Gone again, but the memory of it pressed against my mind, cold, sharp, alive. I exhaled slowly, letting the damp chill wash over me. The fog curled around my ankles, patient and still. Shadows pooled softly at the edges of vision. The metallic glimmer had vanished, yet the unease remained. I looked down at the puddles again. Reflections elongated, subtle, uncanny. The forest waited, soft, patient, alive with whispers and light. And I stepped back, heart pressing against my chest, carrying the memory of the glimmer with me. The fog pressed thick against the trees, curling along roots and rocks like restless smoke. Every step I took left a faint imprint in the damp earth, soft and fleeting. The air smelled cold and metallic, sharp with wet leaves and moss. Then I saw them, pairs of glowing eyes at the edge of the fog, staring directly at me, unblinking at first, patient and silent. I held my breath. The eyes blinked in unison, and then vanished, swallowed by the fog as if they had never been there. The fog shifted. It twisted in patterns I could not comprehend, curling and uncurling, alive in its motion. Every movement of the branches, every rustle of leaves echoed like a whispered warning. The ground felt soft beneath my feet, the chill pressing through my boots. The air was thick with dampness, clinging to my skin and hair. Each breath carried the scent of wet earth, metallic and sharp. I stepped forward cautiously. The fog seemed to lean closer, swirling with purpose. Shadows pooled at the bases of the trees, stretching and bending in impossible ways. Another pair of eyes appeared, faint, glowing, watching from the mist. They blinked once, and were gone. A shiver ran down my spine. The fog moved around me, brushing against my arms and neck like soft fingers. Every sense heightened, every nerve alive with tension and unease. Leaves rustled overhead, whispering in rhythm with the unseen watchers. The air smelled faintly of metal and damp wood, lingering heavy in my chest. I could feel the fog pressing at my face, soft, wet, patient. The eyes appeared again, closer this time, still glowing, still watching. I tried to blink, tried to look away, but my gaze remained locked. And then they vanished. The fog shifted again, curling into shapes that were almost familiar, almost human. Branches scraped softly together, whispering, patient. The ground beneath my feet felt alive, subtle movements, impossible to place. I took a careful step forward. The eyes flickered at the edge of vision, now multiple pairs, scattered through the fog. Each blink synchronized, deliberate, teasing, watching. The air grew heavier. Every rustle, every faint sound magnified in the fog. The metallic tang of wet earth mixed with the damp air, sharp, alive. I tried to focus on the path ahead, but the fog twisted, curling around shadows, around light, around me. The eyes returned again, fleeting, almost playful in their presence. I felt alone. The trees leaned close, branches brushing against one another, whispering secrets I could not understand. The fog pulsed slightly with the rhythm of the blinks, alive and patient, surrounding me on all sides. Another pair of eyes appeared, glowing faintly, watching, waiting, and then gone. The silence pressed, thick, tangible, echoing my own heartbeat in emptiness. I exhaled slowly. The fog shifted once more, curling and twisting over the ground. Shadows pooled and retreated, alive but unseen. The glowing eyes had vanished for now, leaving only memory and the sense of being watched. I stepped forward cautiously, boots pressing soft into damp leaves. The fog wrapped around me, patient, alive, whispering over every branch and root. Every rustle echoed, every breath held tension, every step magnified in stillness. The forest waited, patient, silent, alive in its fog and shadow. The glowing eyes had vanished, but I knew they were still there, watching, waiting, just beyond a veil of mist. I exhaled again, feeling the chill against my skin, carrying the memory of those eyes with me. And I walked forward, deeper into the fog, alone, observed and quietly afraid. The fog hung low, curling along the forest floor, wet and restless. Leaves pressed soft underfoot, damp and decaying. The air smelled cold, earthy, metallic, sharp in the chest. Then I heard it, a rustling, dry leaves and twigs shifting, moving closer, deliberate and patient. I froze, every nerve alive, every sense sharp. The fog distorted everything, blurring shapes into abstraction. A shadow moved just at the edge of the haze, tall, thin, almost liquid in motion. It circled me slowly, never fully emerging, always just beyond reach. My heartbeat grew loud. Each thump synchronized with the rustling. Cold pressed against my skin, damp and soft, crawling along my arms. I tried to see more clearly. The fog twisted, curling around tree trunks, hiding the figure. Branches brushed softly together, whispering. The air smelled of wet leaves and iron, damp and sharp. Another step. The shadows shifted. Closer, always watching, patient, deliberate. I could feel the rustling beneath the fog. Soft, subtle, almost teasing. It was moving with a rhythm that matched my own pulse, pressing against my chest. The trees leaned close, fog wrapping around them, alive. Shadows pulled at the base of the trunks, stretching impossibly long. Every exhale was loud in the stillness, breath mingling with the damp, cold air. The figure circled again, patient and unbroken. No sound beyond the shifting leaves, yet I could feel its presence pressing, waiting. I blinked. It slipped further into the fog, impossible to track, yet always near. The rustling grew, synchronized with the thumping of my heart. Every leaf, every twig seemed to whisper warnings I could not understand. The fog twisted, curling around shapes that almost resembled figures. I took a careful step, boots pressed soft into the damp earth. The shadows shifted slightly, almost playful, almost patient. The cold pressed against my skin, crawling across my arms, my neck. I tried to focus on the ground, on the path, on something real, but the fog refused to let me. Shapes moved just beyond sight, rustling, circling, alive in silence. Another blink. The shadow moved closer, still hidden in the haze. Rustling leaves followed its motion, synchronized with my heartbeat, echoing in my chest. I exhaled slowly. The fog pressed closer, soft and patient. The figure circled, never revealing itself fully, never breaking the rhythm of silence and movement. The forest felt alive. Every leaf, every branch, every breath of fog seemed intentional, deliberate, patient. The rustling slowed slightly, then stopped. The shadow lingered, just beyond perception, waiting. The fog remained thick, curling and shifting, alive in its motion. The cold clung to my skin, damp and persistent. I stepped back, slowly, careful, soft, boots pressing into wet leaves. The rustling faded into silence, yet the memory of it pressed against my mind, soft and persistent. The fog twisted gently around the trunks. Shadows pulled softly at the edges of vision. The figure had not vanished completely. It lingered, patient, circling, watching. I exhaled again, letting the cold press against my skin. The forest remained alive, fog curling, shadows shifting, rustling always near. And I moved forward, heart thumping, alone, observed, and quietly afraid. The road stretched ahead, shrouded in fog that clung to the trees like pale smoke. The air was damp, sharp with the smell of wet leaves and cold metal. Every breath pressed heavy against my chest, slow and deliberate. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Something or someone stood behind the car, tall, pale, unmoving. I turned my head. Nothing. The road was empty, shadows pooling softly among the fog. The headlights cut through the mist, pale beams pressing into the darkness. And then I saw it again, a shimmer on the fog, subtle, almost imperceptible, like eyes watching from another dimension. I blinked. The shimmer vanished, yet the memory lingered, pressing against my mind. The fog shifted around the trees, curling alive. Branches whispered against each other, brushing softly, patient and deliberate. The air smelled damp, metallic, and cold. I glanced at the mirror again. The figure returned, just for a heartbeat, then gone. Every time I looked, it vanished, teasing, impossible to focus on. My heartbeat grew loud, echoing in my chest. Each exhale fogged inside of the windshield, white and ephemeral. The fog outside pressed close, alive in its motion, wrapping around shadows and shapes that weren't meant to be seen. The shimmer returned. Eyes, or something like eyes, glimmering, pale, distant. They hovered in the fog, patient, observing, impossible to reach. I tried to look away, but every turn, every glance brought it back. Patient, still, like it had been there all along. The air pressed cold against my skin. Damp, metallic, alive with the scent of wet earth and rust. The fog twisted gently, curling around the edges of the headlights. Shadows stretched impossibly, moving just at the corner of sight. Another glance in the rear view. The figure, standing still, waiting. Gone the instant I blinked. The headlights caught only the shimmer now, teasing me, impossible to touch. The silence pressed against me, thick and heavy. Every small sound amplified. The shift of fog, the rustle of leaves, the tap of tires on wet asphalt. The figure lingered at the edge of thought, unseen but present. I exhaled slowly, letting my hands rest lighter on the wheel. The fog wrapped around the car like soft fingers, patient and unbroken. Shadows pulled at the edges of the beams, bending, stretching, alive in their stillness. Another glance at the rear view. Gone again. Only the shimmer remained, hovering just at the edge of perception, pale and impossible. I felt the cold press against my face, creeping under my clothes, soft and insistent. The headlights reflected off damp patches on the road, bending light into impossible angles. The shimmer flickered in time with my heartbeat, subtle, deliberate. I kept moving forward, slow, cautious, every sense alive. The fog followed, twisting, curling, whispering with every shift of the air. Shadows pulled softly, always at the edge of vision, and the shimmer, always there, teasing, watching, impossible to forget. I exhaled again, slow, patient. The road stretched ahead, fog curling, shadows bending, cold pressing against my skin. The figure had vanished, but the shimmer remained, waiting, watching. The night was still, unnaturally warm, yet my breath fogged in front of me. Clouds of white curled and hung in the air, drifting slowly, soft and tangible. The forest smelled damp, earthy, metallic, sharp against my skin. A whisper reached me, layered voices, low, almost forming words through static. I couldn't understand, but the cadence pressed against my chest. It was patient, persistent. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, tall, thin, bending against the fog in ways that shouldn't be possible. Every instinct screamed to run. Every step felt heavy, reluctant, drawn out. The static hummed, low and insistent, vibrating in the soles of my boots. Whispers layered over it, brushing against my ears and throat, teasing comprehension. I exhaled, white clouds curling around my face, damp and cold despite the warmth of night. Branches scraped gently together, whispering. The fog twisted around them, alive, curling with intention. Shadows pulled at the base of the trees, stretching, bending, impossible to define. I took a careful step. The ground was soft, moss pressing damp and cold against my boots. The whispers shifted, almost deliberate, brushing against thought as well as ear. Another flicker. A figure or two slipped at the edge of sight. They moved like smoke, almost liquid, dissolving before I could focus. Yet the memory of them lingered, pressing, heavy. The fog swirled around me, curling in impossible patterns. The whispers layered again, soft, patient, almost forming sentences. I leaned slightly forward, trying to hear. The static pulsed, low and insistent, vibrating through the air in my chest. I felt the cold press across my skin, damp and deliberate. The fog clung to my clothes and hair, alive in motion, patient. The figures flickered again, near the trees, behind the mist, never fully revealed. I exhaled slowly, letting the damp, freezing breath settle on my face. Every nerve was alert, every sense heightened. The whispers hummed, layered, persistent. I could feel their rhythm matching my heartbeat, almost pulling at it. Another step. Shapes move again, impossible, fleeting. Branches whispered, leaves shifted softly, fog curling closer. The air smelled metallic, earthy, wet, carrying the weight of the forest. I could feel the instinct to run pulling at me, tightening in my chest. But my feet remained rooted, hesitant, drawn forward by curiosity and fear alike. A flicker in the fog. A shape paused, patient, waiting, then dissolved. Memory of it pressed against my mind, persistent, cold. The whispers softened, lingering in rhythm with the static hum. The fog twisted, coiling around trunks and roots, alive, patient, deliberate. Every breath was visible, every exhale cold against the warm night. I took another careful step. The figures flickered once more, fleeting, impossible to reach. The fog pressed closer, alive and patient. The whispers hummed, brushing against thought and skin alike. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold fog curl around my fingers and wrists. Shapes moved just beyond sight, twisting, bending, alive in absence. The static and whispers pulsed together, low, insistent, patient. The forest waited. The fog twisted, shadows stretched, and I remained. Breath fogging, heart thumping, senses alive with anticipation and dread. Every instinct screamed, every nerve alert. And I stepped forward, deeper into the night, into the whispers, into the cold. The trees thinned, and suddenly the forest opened into a wide clearing. Pale light poured from above, soft, unnatural, casting everything in muted silver. The air smelled damp and cold, earthy with a faint tang of metal. Shadows stretched across the field, long and crooked, bending in ways they shouldn't. Every step I took pressed softly into the grass, wet and cold beneath my boots. The hum started low, almost imperceptible, vibrating through the soles of my feet. I stopped. The hum grew, pulsing steadily, pressing against my bones, low and patient. The air was heavy, vibrating subtly with every pulse, alive in its stillness. The fog lingered at the edges of the clearing, curling and coiling like smoke. Branches leaned close, whispering softly, brushing against one another in rhythm with the hum. The shadows and the pale light shifted slightly, stretching, bending, impossible to track. I felt it before I saw it. Presence, patient, waiting. I couldn't see what it was, only sense it pressing in the air around me. The grass whispered beneath my feet, soft, damp, alive. The hum pressed through my chest, through my arms, into the tips of my fingers. The fog twisted and curled, alive, patient, deliberate in motion. I took another slow step. Shadows stretched longer, pooling and retreating, alive at the edges of perception. The pale light shifted slightly, though the source remained unseen, always just above the treetops. The hum grew in rhythm with my heartbeat, low, insistent. I could feel it vibrating through my bones, soft and deliberate. Every instinct whispered to turn back, to retreat, but curiosity kept my feet moving forward. The clearing felt endless, empty, yet full of waiting. The fog curled around the edges, thick and soft, pressing lightly against my clothes and skin. Shadows twisted, impossible angles, bending around the light. Another pulse of the hum. The earth beneath my boots vibrated gently, soft, patient. I sensed movement at the edge of vision, shapes flickering just beyond sight. The pale light reflected off the tips of grass and scattered puddles, silver and broken. Shadows moved within the light, subtly, patient, deliberate. I exhaled slowly, the cold air pressing in rhythm with the hum, filling my lungs with metallic dampness. I stopped again. Silence followed the hum, brief, almost unbearable. The clearing held its breath with me, patient, waiting. Shapes flickered at the edges, just beyond recognition. The hum returned, low, steady, insistent, vibrating through the air and the earth. I felt in my chest, in my fingers, a subtle insistence that I could not shake. The pale light shifted, brushing across the grass and leaves. Shadows stretched impossibly long, moving just slightly, teasing perception. The fog curled closer, alive, soft, brushing my ankles and wrists. I exhaled slowly again. The hum pressed, subtle, patient, vibrating through everything. I couldn't see what waited, but I knew it was there, silent, patient, watching. I stepped forward cautiously, boots pressing soft into wet earth. The shadows twisted around me, the fog curling, the hum vibrating, the air thick and alive. The clearing waited. I carried the weight of its presence with every slow, deliberate step. The pale light hung above, unwavering, casting the field in silver stillness. The hum pulsed low and steady, vibrating through bone and breath alike. The shapes at the edges flickered, patient, hidden, alive in absence. I exhaled, feeling the cold wrap around me, heavy and tangible. Every instinct screamed to leave, but my feet carried me forward, slow, deliberate, alone. The field remained, silent, the hum vibrating softly beneath my boots. Something waited, always waiting. The fog pressed close, curling along the ground like smoke alive. It smelled damp, metallic, and faintly of decaying leaves. Every step I took stirred it, yet it seemed to shift around me, deliberate, patient. The mist moved in patterns I could not comprehend, curving, coiling, folding over itself like it had intent. It brushed against my ankles, soft, cold, almost tactile. Shapes began to emerge. Humanoid, but wrong. Limbs bent at impossible angles, heads tilting, faces blurred into shadow. I could feel their presence before I saw them. A cold press on my back. Soft, patient, impossible place. Every nerve screamed. Every instinct screamed to run. But my feet stayed, hesitant, drawn forward. The fog twisted with my movement, curling around my boots, brushing soft against my calves. The air smelled damp, earthy, metallic, pressing in my lungs. Shapes flickered at the edge of vision, bending in impossible ways. I turned slowly. Nothing. Just fog, curling, twisting alive. Yet the presence remained, patient, just out of sight. Another step. The humanoid shapes flickered closer, stretching, bending, dissolving in the mist. Shadows pulled unnaturally around them, soft and heavy. I could feel the cold pressing along my spine, brushing, patient. The fog shifted again, moving toward me, curling around the trees, around the shapes, around me. Branches scraped together softly, whispering, rustling in rhythm with the pulse of unseen movement. The shapes emerged and vanished, fleeting, impossible to focus on. A hum vibrated low in the air, subtle, beneath my feet, through the fog, resonating in my chest. Every breath pressed white against the night, curling slowly and lingering. The fog pressed close, tactile, patient, alive in its rhythm. I stepped cautiously, boots pressing soft into the wet, mossy earth. The shapes shifted, bending toward and away from me. Humanoid, wrong, deliberate. I sensed them just beyond sight, patient, waiting. Another turn of the head. Nothing visible, but the presence pressed, cold and persistent, brushing at the edges of perception. The fog curled closer, alive and patient, brushing my wrists and ankles. The shapes flickered, tall, thin, humanoid yet distorted, bending reality softly around them. The hum beneath my feet pulsed gently, synchronized with the rhythm of my heartbeat. I exhaled slowly. The cold fog wrapped around my face and neck, soft and damp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and metal. The shapes moved with every step, coiling around the fog, just beyond perception. Another step. The presence pressed closer. Soft, deliberate, patient. I felt it behind me, brushing against my mind, impossible to locate. The fog swirled, curling, folding, moving with intent. Shadows pulled and twisted in impossible ways, bending the light, bending perception. Humanoid forms flickered, present and absent, wrong and deliberate. I exhaled again, heart thumping in rhythm with the subtle hum. Every nerve alive, every sense alert. The fog pressed, the shapes moved, the presence remained patient, unseen, watching. I stepped forward cautiously, boots pressing soft into wet earth. Fog curling at my ankles. The humanoid forms flickered and vanished in the mist. The presence lingered, patient, just out of sight. The air pressed cold and metallic against my skin. The fog moved, alive, wrapping around trees, shadows, and unseen shapes. I walked forward slowly, heart pounding, breath curling, senses alert. And the mist, it shifted, moving always, alive and watching just beyond my sight. The clearing stretched ahead, pale fog curling at the edges, soft and damp against the earth. The air smelled cold, metallic, with a faint tang of wet leaves. Every breath I exhaled lingered white and heavy, curling around my face. Faint lights appeared on the horizon, small, distant, blinking like trapped stars, pale and deliberate. They moved, slowly at first, then erratically, dancing against the fog. I stepped forward. The ground felt uneven, soft, as if it tried to swallow my boots. Each step pressed wet and cold, the earth tugging lightly at my ankles. The lights shifted closer, then receded, teasing, impossible to reach. I strained my eyes through the fog, tried to follow them, trying to make sense. The air pressed damp against my skin, carrying the faint metallic tang of moisture. I walked slowly, boots sinking slightly with each step. The fog swirled around my legs, curling and coiling, alive in its motion. The blinking lights moved erratically, pulling my attention, drawing me forward. I reached a shallow puddle. The pale reflection shimmered and distorted, fracturing the image of the lights. I stared, heart slow, breath curling in soft fog around my mouth. The lights blinked again, closer, farther, teasing with movement. The fog pressed softly at my face, curling against my cheeks, damp and cold. Every step felt deliberate, weighted, hesitant. I exhaled slowly. The blinking lights pulsed, teasing my perception, almost deliberate. They seemed to float above the fog, above the earth, untouchable, distant. The ground tugged at my feet, soft and unsteady. Boots pressed into wet soil, sinking slightly reluctant. The air smelled damp and earthy, pressed close, soft against my skin. I took another careful step. The lights flickered, dancing, moving impossibly against the fog. Each blink drew my gaze, impossible to look away from, patient, teasing. The fog curled, alive, soft against my ankles, moving with intent. The blinking lights move again, approaching, retreating, impossible to follow. I could feel the earth shift beneath my feet, patient and deliberate. Another step. I exhaled, white curling slowly from my lips. The lights pulsed in rhythm with something unseen, subtle, insistent. The air pressed damp, metallic against my skin, heavy and alive. I stopped briefly, letting my eyes adjust, watching the dancing points of light. They flickered, small, distant, impossible to reach. The fog curled and shifted softly, brushing against boots, ankles, legs. I stepped forward again, each foot sinking slightly into the wet ground. The lights blinked, teasing, impossible to track, always just out of reach. The fog swirled around me, alive and patient, brushing soft against my skin. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold press across my face. The lights pulsed faintly in the distance, blinking, moving, patient. The ground tugged lightly at each step, reluctant, weighted, slow. The fog pressed close, curling, alive, impossible to escape. I moved forward cautiously, boots pressing soft into wet earth. The distant lights danced, flickering like trapped stars, pale, deliberate. The fog swirled, brushing against my ankles, my legs, patient and alive. The blinking lights remained, teasing, distant, impossible to reach. The earth tugged at my steps, slow and deliberate. The fog pressed close, alive and patient. And I moved forward, slow, careful, drawn toward the impossible glow. The fog thickened suddenly, curling low across the ground, wet and metallic against my boots. The air smelled cold, damp, carrying the faint tang of ozone, like electricity in the distance. Each breath I exhaled lingered white, curling softly around my face. Then I saw them, figures tall, humanoid, composed entirely of flickering static, shifting, twisting, impossible in their motion. Their presence pressed against me, suffocating, heavy, undeniable. The fog thickened around them. It wrapped closer, curling into the air like smoke, damp and cold against my skin. Sound became distorted, soft whispers bending and fading in the fog's weight. I stepped slowly forward. The static figures moved, bending in ways that made my stomach twist. Limbs stretched, folded, bodies flickering between existence and nothingness. The hum of the earth beneath my feet joined the static, low and insistent. I could feel it through my bones, vibrating in rhythm with the distortion of the figures. The air pressed damp and metallic against my face, heavy with expectation. I blinked. One figure seemed closer, bending impossibly, edges flickering in and out of sight. The fog thickened again, brushing my legs, wrapping soft around my boots. Another step. The figures shifted, twisting in ways I could not follow. Each movement impossible, deliberate, patient. The suffocating presence pressed against my chest, slow, insistent. The fog distorted everything. Shadows pulled at impossible angles around them, stretching toward me in slow, unnatural arcs. I could hear faint static in the air, humming, soft and suffocating, layering over the fog's dampness. I exhaled slowly. The figures did not speak, yet the weight of their presence pressed against my mind. Each step I took felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted me, soft and unsteady. They shifted closer, limbs bending, folding, disappearing, reappearing in impossible forms. The fog followed them, curling around edges, blurring shapes, soft against my skin. I stopped. The suffocating presence pressed close, patient, waiting. I could feel the static flickering across my vision, vibrating in rhythm with my heartbeat. I dared another step, boots pressed into damp earth, sinking slightly with each careful motion. The static figures flickered, twisted, bending in impossible ways. The fog thickened near them, damp and cold against my wrists and ankles. Sound warped, subtle and soft, bending in impossible patterns. Breath curled white, dense, pressing in my chest. Another blink. The figures shifted, folding inward, stretching outward, bending around the fog. Edges flickered, dissolving into air, yet their presence remained, suffocating. I moved slowly, each step deliberate. The fog pressed around me, heavy, damp, alive with their presence. The static flickered across the edges of perception, soft, insistent, unavoidable. I exhaled, letting the cold press across my face and hands. The figures shifted again, bending, folding, flickering with impossible intent. The fog wrapped soft around my boots and ankles, alive, patient. I stepped forward again. The suffocating presence pressed closer, patient, deliberate. Every nerve in my body screamed. Yet I moved slowly, cautiously, boots sinking soft into wet earth. The static figures remained, shifting, twisting, impossible. The fog clung, damp, metallic, alive, pressing against my skin. Sound warped around me, bending in impossible arcs, suffocating in its silence. I stopped, breath curling slowly into the cold night. The figures pulsed softly, flickering, twisting, patient. The fog thickened further, soft against my body, alive with presence. I exhaled once more, feeling the staticum vibrate through my chest. The figures remained impossible, suffocating, patient. The fog pressed close, curling, alive, and I stood, slow, deliberate, alone in their weight, unable to move, unable to look away. The fog pressed thick around the clearing, damp and cold against my skin. The night smelled faintly of wet earth and metal, heavy in the air. Each breath I exhaled curled slowly, white and soft, lingering. I heard it first. Footsteps, not my own. Soft, deliberate, almost patient. The fog absorbed the sound, yet amplified the fear in my chest. Each pulse of my heartbeat echoed loud in my ears. The air pressed damp against my face, cold, metallic, alive. I stopped, letting the silence settle. The steps continued, slow, steady, circling perhaps, impossible to place. I strained, feeling the weight of the night pressing down. A shadow moved at the edge of the pale light, motionless, watching. I could feel it before I saw it. The fog curled between us, alive, shifting with subtle intent. It brushed soft against my boots, my legs, damp and cold. The presence at the light's edge pressed silently, patient, suffocating. I stepped slowly forward. The earth felt unsteady, reluctant beneath my boots. Each step pressed wet and soft, absorbed by the fog. The figure remained, unmoving, edges blurred, tall, impossible to focus on fully. My breath curled white against my chest, trembling. Another step. Footsteps echoed faintly behind me, impossibly synchronized with the rhythm of the fog. The air felt heavier, damp and metallic against my face, pressing against my skin. I blinked. The figure did not move. The fog shifted, curling around it, alive, bending light and shadow. The footsteps continued, slow, circling. I could feel the presence, suffocating, patient, deliberate. The air carried faint metallic tangs, damp and cold, pressing into my lungs. I exhaled slowly, breath curling white in the dense fog. The figure remained, watching, impossible to focus on fully. Every nerve in my body screamed caution, yet I could not turn away. Another careful step, boots pressed soft into wet earth. The fog wrapped around my ankles and legs, alive with subtle movement. The figure shifted slightly, only the faintest motion. Edges flickered, blurred, impossible to define. The footsteps continued softly, just beyond comprehension. The fog pressed against my face, damp and metallic. The figure remained patient, silent, suffocating in presence. I could feel the weight in my chest, slow, insistent, impossible to escape. I stopped again. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, just behind me. The air felt thick, heavy, alive with something unseen. The figure at the edge of the light remained still, motionless, watching. The fog curled between us, alive, brushing soft against my skin. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold press across my face. The footsteps faded slightly, absorbed into fog, yet the presence remained. The figure did not move, patient, impossible, suffocating. I stepped again, boots sinking slightly into wet, soft earth. The fog pressed close, damp and metallic, curling with subtle motion. The air carried faint, impossible whispers, twisting in the heavy night. The figure remained, shadowed, impossible, patient. The footsteps echoed faintly, circling, deliberate, insistent. I could feel the weight of the presence, pressing softly against my chest. I exhaled again, white curling slowly into the fog. The figure did not move, and the night held me in its patient grip. The footsteps softened, slowed, and faded, leaving only the suffocating presence, and the fog alive, patient, and impossibly watching. The highway stretched ahead, pale under my headlights. But the further I drove, the more it seemed to vanish. Fog thickened, curling soft around the asphalt, damp against my tires. The air grew colder, metallic, pressing against my face. Static buzzed faintly in my ears, low, insistent. I could feel it vibrating through my chest, heavy and disorienting. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind me, it had changed. Dark curves where straight lines had been. Shadows twisting unnaturally along the fog. I tried to slow, but the tires seemed to stick in the mist. Each breath exhaled white, curling soft and cold. The fog pressed close, damp against my arms and face. I looked ahead. Nothing, only dense, swirling gray that swallowed headlights whole. The edges of the road blurred into nothing, impossible to see. The static grew louder, humming in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each pulse in my chest echoed, heavy, insistent. The fog pressed damp against the windshield, cold, metallic, alive. I tried to turn back. The road behind it twisted again, unfamiliar, unrecognizable. Pale light stretched along curves I had never driven. I felt a tug of panic curling in my stomach, slow and insistent. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, impossible shapes, bending, folding, moving with the fog. The headlights caught nothing, yet something pressed close. I slowed again. The tires sank slightly into the wet asphalt, sticky and soft. Fog curled around the car, alive, following, patient. I blinked. The road ahead was gone, swallowed by gray. The static pulsed in my ears, low, insistent, vibrating through my bones. I could feel the fog pressing damp, metallic against my skin. I exhaled slowly, breath curling soft into the cold, dense night. The road behind was different again, twisting, impossible. I tried to focus, but each movement felt slowed, heavy, unnatural. The fog pressed close, curling around tires and doors, alive with presence. Shadows twisted in impossible ways at the edges of the headlights. The static hummed, pulsing, suffocating. I glanced forward once more. Nothing but fog, dense and thick. The road had disappeared entirely, leaving only endless gray. I could feel the air heavy, metallic, pressing into my lungs. Each breath trembled, curling soft and white. Every instinct screamed to stop, to reverse, yet the car refused. The fog shifted slightly, curling at the edges, alive with intent. Static buzzed low and constant, vibrating through my chest. I could feel shapes moving just beyond the headlights, impossible and patient. I stopped, letting the car idle in the gray. The fog pressed close, damp, metallic, suffocating. The road ahead gone. The road behind, twisted, unrecognizable. And the static hummed in my ears, low and insistent, like a pulse, like something alive. I exhaled slowly, letting the damp air press against my face. The fog swirled, dense, patient, impossibly still. The road had disappeared, and I remained alone, suspended in gray, with only the hum and the fog and the impossible silence pressing in. The night pressed cold and heavy against the car. Fog curled thick around the headlights, damp and slow. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and metal, heavy in my lungs. A low hum filled the space, constant, vibrating through the car. It pressed against my chest, slow and insistent, impossible to ignore. Breath trembled in my throat, curling white in the cold air. Shapes flickered in the fog beyond the headlights. Tall, thin, impossibly stretched. Edges blurred, twisting softly, moving with purpose I could not comprehend. The hum seemed to grow louder with each pulse of my heartbeat. I could feel it vibrating through my bones, through the steering wheel under my hands. The air pressed damp against my face, metallic and heavy. I blinked, and the shapes shifted again, closer, or perhaps I had moved forward. Impossible to tell. The fog swirled, curling around tires and car doors, alive with subtle motion. Something pressed against it, a presence stretching toward me. I could feel it in the damp, metallic tang of the air, in the vibration through the seat. I exhaled slowly, breath curling white into the fog. The hum pulsed softly in rhythm of my pulse. The shapes moved, patient, deliberate, impossibly thin, impossibly tall. I tried to lean closer to the windshield, to see. Edges shifted, blurring into one another, dissolving then reappearing. The fog pressed close, cold, wet, metallic. Something pressed a little harder against the fog, almost reaching, almost brushing the glass. Impossible shapes, patient, waiting. The low hum thrummed steadily, vibrating in my chest. It filled the car, pressed against my ears, damp and metallic. Each breath I drew trembled, curling slowly, white against the night. I could feel movement just beyond the headlights, soft and deliberate, bending, impossible to focus on fully. The fog twisted with it, alive, patient, impossible. I stepped slightly on the brake. The shapes paused, then shifted in impossible unison. Edges blurred, twisting, folding against themselves. The hum pressed heavier, vibrating through my bones. I exhaled, slow, trying to ground myself, but the fog pressed close, curling around tires, around doors, around me. I could feel the presence stretching closer, patient, deliberate. Breath trembled in my throat, curling white into the damp night. The metallic tang of air pressed heavy, impossible, alive. The shapes flickered again, impossibly tall, impossibly thin. Edges blurring, bending in the fog, moving with purpose. Something pressed against it, almost reaching, almost tangible. The low hum continued, constant, vibrating through the seat, the steering wheel, my chest. Impossible to ignore, impossible to place. I leaned back, breath trembling, white curling into the damp, metallic night. The shapes shifted, patient, deliberate, watching in the fog, alive, curling, pressing, moving. The hum softened slightly, pulsing gently now with my pulse. Shapes remained impossibly tall, impossibly thin, stretching against the fog. Something lingered close, pressing almost against the glass, patient, impossible. I exhaled again, letting the cold press soft against my face. The fog curled, thick and alive, around the car. The shapes remained patient, bending, twisting, impossibly close. And the low hum, constant, impossible, vibrating through everything. The fog pressed thick tonight, damp and clinging. The air smelled of wet earth and something colder beneath it. My breath curled white in the dim light of the headlights. And then I saw them, pale figures emerging from fog, elongated, impossibly tall, drifting softly over the damp ground. They tilted their heads, slow, deliberate, watching me, not with malice, but something else. The hum of the night seemed to deepen, vibrating softly through the car, through the bones of the earth, through me. Every rustle of the wet leaves echoed, sharp, impossible. I felt something ancient in their gaze, something not meant to be understood, a memory older than words, stretching out through the fog. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, catching the dim light in a way that made shadows bend around them. They moved without sound, soft and deliberate. I could feel the air bending, pressing closer, a soft vibration under my feet, in my chest, as though the fog itself were alive, watching with them. I blinked, and they were closer, tilting heads, studying me with that impossible stillness. Eyes too deep, too empty, and yet knowing. The wind whispered through the trees, wet and hollow. Every exhale of mine trembled in rhythm with their approach. The fog swirled, forming impossible shapes at the edges of vision. I wanted to move, but the ground felt strange beneath my feet, solid and yet yielding as though hesitant to support me. A faint metallic tang entered the damp air, cold and soft, brushing against my skin without touching. The figures remained still, patient, watching. Their elongated limbs bent in ways that made my mind ache. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the fog, twisting as if the light itself were afraid to settle. I could hear nothing but the soft pulse of the hum, rising and falling like the slow breathing of the night. Shapes flickered around them, impossible, alive. I took a cautious step forward. The fog seemed to flow around me, almost guiding, almost warning. Their gaze followed, and a shiver of understanding, alien and ancient, touched my mind. I could not name it. It made my chest ache. Curiosity and dread tangled in a single pulse. They tilted their heads again, silent, patient, watching me with that impossible stillness. I felt a knowledge in their presence I could not process, something older than the road, the fog, the night itself. The rustling of leaves grew faint, as if the world held its breath. The hum beneath my feet, through the car, through my chest, softened, and for a moment I thought I understood, not with words, not fully, but with some deep, trembling sense. I was not alone. And these pale visitors had been waiting. I exhaled slowly, white curling into the damp air. They did not move closer, did not speak. Yet the understanding remained, pressing lightly against my mind, ancient, alien, impossible to ignore. The fog curled, dense and alive. Around them, soft shapes flickered at the edges, bending impossible. And then, as quietly as they came, they shifted slightly, almost blending with the mist, patient, watching, eternal. I leaned back, hands trembling on the wheel. The fog pressed close, damp and metallic, and the hum pulsed gently, like the echo of something vast beyond comprehension. The pale visitors remained, tilting their heads, patient and silent, and I sat alone with the knowledge that the night had shifted, that something not meant to be understood had noticed me. The fog pressed against the edges of the headlights, damp and alive. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and cold metal. My breath curled in little white clouds that vanished too quickly. Every shadow seemed to move, not with the wind, not with the trees, but independently, stretching and bending in ways that made the eyes ache. I stepped forward. A shadow mimicked me, tilting its head, bending like liquid. Then it diverged, twisting into impossible angles, falling over itself, yet remaining upright. The fog pulsed with each movement, soft waves of gray rolling over the ground, over the trees, over me. It felt alive, breathing slowly, deliberately, around every footstep. I could hear the rustle of unseen leaves. Or perhaps it was the shadows brushing each other. Every step I took, the fog thickened, dense, damp against my skin. The road ahead seemed uncertain, blurred. Shadows stretched across it, elongated and wrong. Sometimes they vanished entirely, only to appear in places I had just been. A cold hum rose from the ground, low, vibrating through my chest, making the air feel heavier. My heartbeat synchronized, thudding in quiet panic. I paused, a shadow separated from the rest, following me exactly, mirroring my every motion. I lifted my hand. It lifted. I turned my head slowly, and it turned, but then looked somewhere else entirely. The fog shifted, curling, twisting like smoke caught in a glass. Every direction held movement, subtle, impossible, unsettling. I could feel eyes on me, though no one was there. The air was damp against my cheeks, cold against my neck. Shadows lengthened and contracted with no source of light. A soft metallic tang lingered, unplaceable, brushing my tongue. I tried to step forward. The ground felt unsteady, like walking on water made thick with mist. Shadows flowed beneath my feet, merging, dividing, impossible. Every time I blinked, the shapes changed. One moment they were humanoid. The next they stretched into angles that made me shiver. The fog seemed to respond to them, curling like it had intent. I whispered a name I could not remember, but the fog swallowed it instantly. The shadow near me tilted its head in perfect imitation, and then diverged, spinning softly and possibly before settling back. I pressed my hands to my chest. The pulse of the hum vibrated through my bones, low and steady, like a heartbeat that was not mine. The fog swirled with each exhale, brushing my skin damp cold, unyielding. The shadows moved again. In a synchronized rhythm, stretching, curling, tilting. They flowed around me, surrounding, never touching, but suffocating all the same. I could smell damp earth, wet leaves, something older beneath it, like stone heated by a sun I could not see. The fog and the shadows moved as one organism, patient, watching, aware. A single shadow lingered closer than the rest. It mirrored a movement I did not make. I froze. It mimicked the smallest twitch of my fingers, paused, then diverged. The fog pulsed gently with its motion. Every inhale tasted faintly metallic, damp, cold. I felt isolation press down, heavy and slow. I exhaled. The shadows did not disperse, but shifted slightly, as though acknowledging my presence. The fog hummed softly, vibrating in rhythm with the low pulse beneath my feet. I could not move. I could not look away. Every shadow alive, breathing with the fog, alive in ways my mind could not understand. I leaned back, pressed my hands against my legs. The pulse of the hum softened, the fog curling in lazy spirals. The shadows remained patient, impossible, surrounding, a quiet reminder that even here alone, I was never truly alone. The fog clung to the edges of the trees, thick and damp. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and cold metal. My breath puffed out in pale clouds that vanished instantly. I turned back toward the place I had parked. The car wasn't there. Nothing but fog, swallowing the ground where it had been. A cold weight pressed against my chest. Panic rose like a tide, slow and heavy. My legs, they would not move. Figures flickered in the haze. Tall, thin, shifting, their edges like static caught in a broken signal. They observed, silent, patient. I tried call out. No sound came, only the hum of fog, vibrating through my bones. The ground beneath my feet was wet and soft. Leaves stuck to my shoes. The air carried the faint tang of metal and smoke, though nothing burned. One figure drifted closer, almost floating. Its outline wavered, flickered. Eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to pierce through the fog. I swallowed hard. The static around them crackled faintly. Every step I imagined taking felt like trudging through water made of clouds. The fog twisted, curling around my legs like fingers. Shapes moved at the periphery of my vision, vanishing when I blinked. Whispers or the faint vibration of static. I could not tell. I shifted my weight. The figures mirrored me, but then diverged, twisting in ways that were wrong, impossible. Their silence pressed against me, heavy and immovable. I could smell damp soil, wet moss, something older beneath it, like stone warmed by a sun I could not see. The fog pulsed with the movement of shadows. The static buzzed softly, almost musical, almost human. I wanted to run, but my legs did not obey. The ground seemed to stretch, lengthen, swallow every step I attempted. Every glance back revealed only fog. Swallowing the world I thought I knew. The nearest figure tilted its head, motionless, watching, waiting. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. A soft rustle echoed through the haze. Perhaps the fog itself moved. Perhaps it breathed. The absence of the car made the world feel unreal. The headlights, the familiar shape, the sense of safety, they had all dissolved into mist. I was alone yet surrounded. The figures shifted again, slightly, just enough to remind me they were alive. Or alive in a way I could not understand. My breath came in shallow waves. The air tasted damp, metallic, cold. The fog vibrated faintly against my skin. I tried to speak again. My voice failed me. Only the static of the figures responded, softly, endlessly. Time felt suspended. Each second stretched and warped. The fog, the figures, The silence. They existed without beginning or end. I blinked. The shapes flickered, pulsing, then froze. I felt every inch of the fog pressing closer, a living thing aware of me. The absence of my car, the shifting figures, the impossible fog, it all pressed in, heavy and slow, like the world had tilted and left me behind. I inhaled slowly, tasting dampness and fear. The figures remained. The fog remained. The car remained gone. And I stood there, frozen, alone yet not alone. In the silence, the fog, the hum, I could feel their eyes on me. Waiting, the fog pressed against the trees, thick and damp. Night hung low, heavy with cold. Every leaf, every branch, seemed coated in silence. Above the treetops, something shifted. Shadows moved in ways the moon could not explain. I felt the air thicken. The faint tang of iron and wet bark lingered in my nose. A low vibration hummed beneath my feet. Subtle but insistent, the metallic scrape. Soft, precise, like claws sliding over steel. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The fog twisted around the trees, around the shapes above. Bending, curling, almost alive. I tilted my head. The movement defied gravity. Branches swayed, but not from wind. The scrape came again, closer, rising, echoing faintly, vibrating through my chest. Shapes hovered above, elongated, unnatural. Edges flickered like static in a broken signal. They didn't fall. They didn't perch. They existed in the wrong space. I stepped forward. Leaves crunched underfoot, dry and brittle. The fog swallowed the sound, then returned it twisted, unfamiliar. The metallic scrape repeated, rhythmic but uneven, each echo making my skin crawl, hair standing on end. The shadows moved with subtle intent, tilting, stretching, bending in impossible arcs. I felt watched, not just seen, but measured. A cold draft brushed my cheek. The smell of ozone mixed with damp earth. Every inhale carried fear like dust. I tried to listen, to separate the forest from the unnatural. But the fog carried it all. Scrape, hum, rustle, together, a symphony of wrongness. The shapes hovered above, shifting again. Now slower, deliberate. The fog twisted, thickened, curling toward me. My legs felt heavy, rooted to wet soil. The branches above swayed in impossible ways. Shadows flickered, almost falling, but the light never changed. A soft metallic scrape, sharp, precise, cut through the quiet. It resonated against the hollow spaces of fog. I shivered, feeling its vibration through my bones. The world tilted slightly. The fog bent. The shapes above rippled like liquid, almost sentient. I took a careful step back. The ground clung to my boots, wet and stubborn. The fog followed, breathing with me, moving around shapes I could not name. Above, the shadows twisted, mirrored my hesitation. A pause, then a subtle sway, as if testing. I closed my eyes, felt the scrape vibrate through the night, felt the fog curl and twist around my chest, around my mind. When I opened them, the shadows lingered, just beyond comprehension, silent, watching, waiting. The metallic scrape faded, leaving only a low hum. The fog thickened, soft and suffocating. I stood alone, every nerve alert, every sense stretched taut. The trees breathed, the fog breathed. I could almost sense the shapes above, tilting, shifting, folding into dimensions I could not reach. I shivered, the cold of night and fear mingling. My heart beat loud, synchronized with the subtle pulse of the mist. The scrape was gone, but the awareness remained. The fog wrapped around me, silent, slow, undisturbed by wind or time. The shapes above, they had not moved far, and I knew I would feel them, always hovering, in the fog, in the shadows, in the space just above the trees. Watching, waiting. The night pressed in. Cold air weighed on my shoulders, heavy and unyielding. Static crackled faintly in my ears, like electricity trapped in fog. Figures lingered at the edge of vision, tall, thin, shifting, almost translucent. I could not focus on them, yet I felt their gaze. My breath fog in the frigid air. Each inhale carried the scent of wet earth and something metallic, sharp. The fog clung to my skin, cold and damp. I tried to scream. The sound caught in my throat. Only my heartbeat answered me, loud and insistent, pounding against the chest of the night. The figures moved subtly, sliding in the corner of my eyes. Not walking, not gliding, but folding into the space around them. Impossible angles, shapes that should not exist. The pressure grew. The air seemed to compress, pressing into my ribs and spine. Static hummed through the ground beneath my feet, through my fingers, through my teeth. Shadows shifted unnaturally around the fog. Branches overhead bent, but there was no wind. Leaves whispered in impossible patterns, dry and brittle against invisible claws. I shivered. Cold seeped into bones, but it was more than temperature. A weight, a presence. I forced my eyes to the nearest figure. It did not move, yet it loomed, watching, tilting its head, studying me with hollow focus. The heartbeat in my ears grew louder, matched by the soft hum of static, vibrating through the fog. I blinked. The figure wavered, almost disappearing, then reformed, closer than before. Every instinct screamed to run. My legs would not obey. The fog wrapped tighter around my ankles, sticky, alive. A cold draft brushed my cheek. The metallic tang of ozone lingered. I could almost feel the figure's breath against my skin, though no one moved. The pressure shifted, harder now, compressing my chest, making each inhale shallow and deliberate. The figure seemed to lean inward, yet remained at the edge of sight. I tried to listen. Rustling leaves, the soft hum, the hum of my own blood, everything layered together, a symphony of wrongness. My arms felt heavy, my fingers numb, every nerve alert, trembling against an invisible weight. The fog twisted, curling around the figures, around me. I felt their awareness, patient and cold, silent yet insistent. I closed my eyes, hoping for distance. The pressure persisted. The hum, the heartbeat, the weight, it did not let go. Opening them, the figures were still there, shifting imperceptibly, breathing with the fog, bending the night in ways I could not name. The metallic tang lingered in the air. The fog tightened, swallowing sound and light. I could feel the cold pressing deeper through my chest and into my thoughts. I tried to move, step back, escape. My feet were heavy, unresponsive. The figures remained, distant yet near, watching in perfect stillness. The static hum rose, subtle, almost comforting in its consistency. Yet every pulse reminded me of the weight above, the figure surrounding, waiting. I was alone, yet entirely observed. The night stretched. Cold and static pressed into my skin. The fog breathed with me, around me, through me. I stood frozen, heartbeat and hum aligned, trapped in the moment. The figures lingered at the edge of vision, and I could not look away. The clearing opened before me. Pale light spilled across the ground, unnatural and steady. Fog swirled around the edges, thick and curling, hiding and revealing all at once. I felt it first in my chest. A hum, low and vibrating, pulsing through my bones. The air tasted metallic, sharp and cold. Figures emerged from the fog, elongated forms, pale, almost transparent. They moved slowly, deliberate, stepping into glow as if drawn by it. The light clung to them, shapes bending, dissolving into brightness, edges melting into radiance. My eyes could not hold them, yet I could not look away. The fog reacted. It twisted violently, curling around me, around the clearing, a dizzying motion, soft and suffocating, like walking underwater in the night. I swallowed hard. The metallic tang lingered in the air, mingled with damp earth. Every breath felt heavy, saturated with the cold hum of the clearing. The figures seemed weightless, stepped silent, gliding, then folding into the pale glow. Each movement stretched impossibly, bending my understanding of form. The ground beneath me shivered, a subtle vibration, aligned with the hum. It moved through my feet, up my legs, making my spine tingle. I reached out instinctively. The fog shifted, spilling around my fingers, insubstantial yet cold. The figures remained, dissolving, reforming, always present yet never fully real. The clearing felt alive, light pulsing, fog twisting, shadows bending in impossible directions. I was alone, yet every sense told me I was observed. I blinked. A figure disappeared into the glow, leaving only the shimmer behind. Another step forward, head tilting unnaturally, studying me. The fog pressed closer. Static crackled softly in the air, vibrating against my ears and teeth. The hum deepened, a tone that resonated in my chest and my mind. I tried to steady myself. The glow made the shadows pale, yet they shifted in rhythm with the fog. I felt weightless, suspended in the moment between fear and awe. Figures continued to emerge, elongating, dissolving, folding into the light. A sense of recognition or understanding stirred in my chest, alien and incomprehensible. It was a knowledge I could not grasp, yet it pressed insistently against my mind. The fog twisted again. It felt almost alive, carrying whispers I could not interpret. The hum vibrated harder, steady, consuming, filling the clearing. I stepped forward. The ground seemed soft, like it might swallow me. The figures floated, shifting with each pulse of light. A cold breeze brushed my face. The metallic scent sharp, biting. The glow reflected off the fog in shimmering streaks, painting everything with impossible colors. Time stretched. I could not tell how long I lingered, how long I watched. Each figure seemed eternal, yet momentary, appearing and dissolving with the hum of the clearing. I exhaled slowly. The fog wrapped tighter, the glow pulsating like a heartbeat. The figures lingered, quiet, observing, dissolving into light. I wanted to speak. A single word would not come. Only my breath, visible and trembling, met the cold air. The clearing remained, glowing, fog alive, figures dissolving. I was suspended, neither moving forward nor able to retreat. The alien light pressed against my vision, my chest, my mind, and I stood there, alone in the clearing, the fog swirling violently, the figures fading into the glow, and the hum vibrating through everything, through me. The road appeared again, straight and silent, cutting through the fog like it had never vanished. Headlights reflected off the mist, thick and pale, curling around the edges of the asphalt. The air was still. No hum pulsed through the ground, no vibration in my chest. Yet a presence lingered, unseen, just beyond the periphery of my vision. The fog clung to the trees. It twisted slowly, alive but quieter now, like it had paused to watch. The scent of damp earth and metal lingered, faint, almost comforting, but wrong. I gripped the wheel tighter, each breath visible in the cold night air. My heart beat loud, echoing against the empty highway. Shadows pressed at the corners of my vision, not moving exactly, not still. I drove on. The tires hummed against the asphalt, muted and hollow. Every mile seemed both familiar and impossible, stretched in by the lingering dread. The fog shifted. It danced along the roadside, curling around signposts, clinging to the trees. Sometimes I thought I saw movement within it, figures I had known or not known, flickering in and out. I blinked. The shapes vanished, leaving only pale light and the scent of wet leaves. I felt their gaze, silent, patient, watching through the fog. The highway stretched endlessly. Each marker passing under the headlights felt slower than the last. Isolation wrapped around me like a cold, damp blanket. I tried to focus on the road. The hum was gone, yet my chest still thrummed with tension. Every sense sharpened, ears straining, skin prickling, breath shallow and visible. The fog seemed thicker ahead, swirling, bending around the asphalt, hiding the edges of the world. It reminded me of everything I had seen, and everything I could not comprehend. I imagined the figures, the pale lights, the dissolving shapes. They lingered at the edges of memory, pressing softly against my mind. I could not shake them, even as the road reappeared beneath my tires. The night was quiet. No rustling the trees, no static in the air. Only the fog, moving like a living thing, and the faint, impossible feeling of being followed. I drove past a broken signpost. The letters faded under the headlights, half erased by time, or something older. The fog wrapped around it like smoke, curling, almost protective. A shadow passed over the road. Quick, fleeting, impossible to identify. I didn't swerve. I could not. The highway continued. lines stretching into the distance, straight and unforgiving. The cold pressed against the windows, against my skin, reminding me I was alone. I thought of the clearing, the alien glow, the dissolving figures. Their memory lingered, echoing to my chest, soft but insistent. I could feel them there, somewhere beyond the fog, watching still. The fog thinned slightly. The moon, hidden before, now glimmered weakly, casting pale shadows across the asphalt. The night smelled of wet pine and cold stone. I exhaled, slowly. The road felt real, solid beneath the tires. Yet the sense of being followed did not fade. It lingered, quiet, patient, as though it had always been there. I drove, and though the highway returned and the hum was gone, I knew the clearing, the figures, the fog. They had not left. They followed in silence, beyond sight, beyond understanding. And so I drove, into the night, into the mist, haunted by what I had seen, or what had seen me.